Diomo Venek Dal, in the time of Nephatah, was little more than an insane and blinded old Dunmer. Many years before this, he was a younger man, barely 30, when his mother, Gormemtu, passed away from wounds inflicted upon her during her travels with him. Gormemtu had little patience for anything, including her own son Diomo. They traveled together, but shared little else. Diomo, born from a man Gormemtu would only spend a single night with, was nothing more to Gormemtu than a weakling to carry supplies and help her as a tool. This hurt Diomo, but despite this, he would do anything his mother asked him to. They were part of a lowly but powerful and secret Daedric cult located somewhere remote in Morrowind. They were a small group, and their collection of actual artifacts smaller, but little deterred them in their search for powerful relics. Gormemtu was sent on a life's mission to search for a certain Elder Scroll known as Void. This search consumed 20 years of Gormemtu and Diomo's lives, ending with Gormemtu's death. Diomo cursed his mother and the very Daedric princes themselves. He would continue this search, but not for his cult or the princes. He did this for himself. The reason their cult searched for these specific scrolls was due to its knowledge contained within that focused on the realm which held oblivion itself. Though this scroll was the only way to learn of a powerful magic known only as Soul Tear Weave, something prophesied to allow a user to exist between the realms of oblivion while remaining invisible to the very princes themselves. Diomo did not know if he'd be the first to do such a thing, or even if it truly existed, but he cared little as he buried his mother and moved forward with his search. Though, unknown to him, he was being watched from far beyond. Later that night, Hermaeus Mora appeared before him within a small cave Diomo was camping within. Mora would offer assistance in finding the Elder Scroll before Diomo could even catch his breath. When Diomo could finally muster the ability to speak, he simply asked the Daedric prince why. Mora, tentacles and eyes pouring out of darkness, simply replied plainly, "Your sight shall be exchange enough." It would not be taken, but changed. With that, Hermaeus dissipated, his form evaporating or flinging back into the darkness. He vanished, save a single tentacle, which landed on the cave floor. It began to melt away, leaving behind a single dagger. Upon it was an eye, engraved into the very blade. Its handle, multiple tentacles swirling down into the end of the handle which sat a closed crab's claw. Diomo took this dagger, and with renewed purpose, packed his things and set out in the middle of the night. Diomo couldn't explain it, but he would never tire, and somehow knew where to place his every step. Whenever he would ignore his feeling and step elsewhere, the engraved eye would glow red, so he rarely did. His journey would take him to the mountains between Cyrodiil and Skyrim, discovering an undisturbed cave. The cave barely had space for insects. A cave-in right at the entrance had seen that. Diomo spent everything he had to hire workers to clear the cave-in. In 2 weeks, Diomo himself would never stop for an instant. Once the job was done, he swiftly killed the workers and headed inside. Within, he would find an ancient Nord crypt. At the end, a stone coffin sat against the wall, with an Elder Scroll built into the actual stone. This must have been a great warrior, he thought. Diomo cleared his head as he did everything within his power to remove that Elder Scroll, simply touching it, and he knew he'd found Void. The stone coffin door piece finally broke after Diomo's 45th attempt in dropping it off the balcony of the tomb room, dragging it back up the stairway, and repeating the process. Diomo cheered, covered in sweat as he saw it break apart, and the Elder Scroll roll to a stop. He made his way down the stairway with haste, practically jumping down onto his knees as he reached for the scroll. Without thinking, he opened it before his eyes. This would become his greatest regret. A bright flash beamed into his sight, blinding the world around him as symbols, words, and images he didn't understand flew within what felt like his very eyes and mind. His very mouth lost control as he spewed forth words he didn't mean to. Between realms, soul terror, voidwalker. Diomo would repeat that last phrase as he stumbled out of the tomb, back through the small crypt and out the cave, tripping over numerous things through his exit. Diomo screamed to Mora as he fell to the ground, falling into the blood pools of his workers. Mora would not appear as he shook in pain from the feeling of his mind bleeding from the pounding of the knowledge from the Elder Scroll. Suddenly he realized that he held the dagger Mora gave unto him. He took the dagger, held it high into the sky as he again screamed for Mora. Nothing happened. He continued, all pleas ignored. Diomo then mistook sunlight as symbols flashed in the corner of his sight. With that he attempted to bring the dagger to his face, to examine it, and as the dagger was brought close, it jumped from his hand and landed harmlessly against him, with the blade at his forehead and nose, and the handle at his mouth. In an instant it began fusing into his face with great pain. Diomo grabbed at it, attempting to remove the dagger, but it was already halfway gone. Driven mad, he began clawing, desperately trying to remove this object of great torment. Bumps and scars in the frame of the dagger was all that remained of it as Diomo spasmed in painful madness, foaming at the mouth and bleeding from every orifice in his head. He fell into a deep sleep, as if all the endless energy spent needed to be accounted for. Some men from the town in which Diomo hired the workers from came to investigate. To them, everyone was dead. The men ran back to their town, gathered others, and quickly returned to take the bodies and flee before whatever was in that cave came for them. Diomo, barely breathing to the point of appearing dead, was shipped back to Vivek due to some information found in his personal journal. A fake, to have any dead members of the cult sent back to a city in which they, and anything not stolen from their corpse, could be collected. Diomo would awake 3 months later in a crypt located within their cult's sanctuary. The other members would question his sudden resurrection, but there was little they could gather from him between his spouts of madness. He had moments of clarity, but they were far in between the insane ramblings and nonsense. Though he would not be sent out or killed, for on his forehead sat a sigil of Hermaeus Mora, the cult knew he had been touched, in some way, by the Prince of Knowledge himself. So within the sanctuary, Diomo Vanek Dal would remain for the rest of his life. This is what the cult wanted. This is what Hermaeus Mora wanted, for he knew that Diomo would not have been the first to tear himself into the realm between the planes of oblivion, and Hermaeus Mora intended to find the first Voidwalker, whom, through his infinite knowledge, knew Diomo would meet. Mora did not know when or where, but knew their presence would be shared at some point within their lives. As time went, Diomo would see only darkness and burnt symbols, though, when the time was right, he would see another of his kind, a woman with no hair and eyes redder than fire.